At 1:10 hours local time on the 15th of July 2026, a Russian Mi-28 attack helicopter lifted off from a forward base in the Belgorod border region, beginning a mission to patrol the airspace, establish a low-altitude air defense network, and hunt the very Ukrainian unmanned aircraft that had been striking Russian positions. The morning flight appeared completely routine. The Mi-28 maintained a low altitude, skimming over vast open fields and using uneven terrain and shelter belts to conceal its flight path from observation posts across the border. But what the two Russian pilots did not know was that since 800 hours local time, 6 Ukrainian Shrike-10 FPV operators had been hiding inside the tree lines, patiently waiting for the target to appear. Their high-speed UAVs had all been modified to carry fragmentation warheads, powerful enough to turn what seemed like a safe patrol into a life-or-death battle in midair. And exactly 33 minutes later, they would attempt something no unit had ever achieved before. Thanks to information from the Attaché's Partisan Reconnaissance Network, the phones of all 6 operators vibrated almost at the same time. A combined message had just arrived confirming the flight direction, altitude, and corridor the Mi-28 was likely to pass through. The 6 operators immediately split into 3 teams and spread out across 3 key areas. The first team of 2 Shrike-10 drones monitored the corridor running along the main Moscow to Kharkiv railway. The second team controlled the White Hills area. The final team set up an ambush near the Seversky Donets River Valley, where low terrain and riverside tree lines could be used by the Russian helicopter to hide its route. They had only one chance. If they missed, the Mi-28 would complete the low-altitude air defense network, detect Ukrainian UAV launch routes, and fully intercept future Ukrainian drone attacks. Fortunately, they had a secret acoustic sensor network combined with AI direction-finding sensors deployed weeks earlier, silently listening for every rotation of helicopter blades across the border region. The wireless acoustic detection system you are seeing here is Zvuk, an acoustic early warning network secretly deployed by Ukraine along the border region. This system uses long-range radio links to transmit small data packets up to 8 miles away while consuming even less power than a digital wristwatch. Thanks to solar panels, each sensor station can operate continuously for weeks without soldiers having to approach it to replace batteries or perform maintenance. Instead of relying on a single device, Zvuk establishes a network of thousands of microphones and AI-assisted directional sensors. They are camouflaged on tree trunks deep inside shelter belts or along border wire obstacles, where they are extremely difficult to detect from the ground or from the air. Each device silently listens for the deep, steady, heavy thumping signature created by helicopter rotors and engines. When the Mi-28 enters the area, the sensors record the exact millisecond at which the sound reaches each position. Because sound travels through air at 1,125 feet per second, even a tiny difference between receiving stations is enough for the system to calculate the helicopter's flight direction, speed, and position through triangulation. More importantly, every aircraft leaves behind its own acoustic fingerprint. The Mi-28's twin Klimov TV3117 turbine engines rotate at 15,000 revolutions per minute, producing a fundamental sound band between 250 and 325 Hz. This frequency can penetrate fog, tree canopies, and shelter belts, places where optical cameras are blocked and low-altitude radar often struggles to maintain a target track. Zvuk's artificial intelligence immediately compares the captured signal with a pre-stored military acoustic library. Within seconds, the system can distinguish the engine sound of a Mi-28 from trucks, tractors, civilian aircraft, or other helicopters operating in the area. The solar-powered sensor stations continuously send data through a low-power radio network. By combining signals from multiple directions, Zvuk locks the helicopter's position with an error margin of only about 150 feet within an 8-mile radius. It is like a battlefield version of Flight Radar 24, but without needing the target to transmit any signal. It listens to the sky, and the moment the Mi-28 dot appears, its coordinates are immediately sent to the 3 Shrike-10 teams hidden along the Moscow to Kharkiv route, the White Hills, and the Seversky Donets Valley. The first Zvuk sensor picked up a steady, repeating low-frequency pulse from the main rotor blade beat at around 20.1 Hz. Only a few seconds later, 2 other sensor stations confirmed the same signal. By precisely comparing the moment the sound reached each position, the system quickly locked the target's coordinates with an error margin of less than 150 feet. A Mi-28 had appeared. Immediately, the control team waiting in ambush along the Moscow-Kharkiv railway launched the first 2 Shrike-10 reconnaissance drones from the tree line. Meanwhile, the team at White Hills continued checking the acoustic data to determine whether the helicopter was turning north. but there was still not enough information to know exactly which corridor it would pass through. To the south, the team near the Seversky Donets River Valley began calculating intercept angles for all three possible directions. They understood that once the Mi-28's flight path became clear, the 6 operators would have only a few seconds to decide which team would launch the attack and which would remain in reserve. On the team leader's tablet, the acoustic data points began connecting into a moving curve. The sun had risen over the Belgorod border, but the fog remained thick. The temperature difference had created layered air, bending sound waves downward and extending the detection range of the rotor noise. Instead of being detected at only 1 mile, the Mi-28's distinctive rotor beat could now be heard by Zavuk sensors from 3 miles away. 3 receiving stations continuously updated the data, gradually narrowing the helicopter's position, altitude, and direction of movement. Only 5 seconds later, the final flight path became clear. The Mi-28 was following a corridor parallel to the Moscow-Kharkiv Railway, moving at 110 miles per hour at an altitude of 120 feet. The 2 pilots were using the railway line, shelter belts, and ground structures as navigation references because satellite signals in the area were being distorted by jamming equipment from both sides. At the same time, they limited the use of active emission systems to avoid turning themselves into an easily detected electronic target. The interception problem remained extremely unforgiving. The helicopter was fast enough to leave the Shrike-10's engagement zone within only a few minutes. It flew close to the ground to avoid radar, followed the railway to maintain direction, and held a steady speed to complete its patrol mission with the lowest possible fuel consumption. The 6 operators could not simply launch UAVs and chase it. They had to predict where the Mi-28 would appear, move the Shrike-10s ahead of its flight path, and turn the sky directly in front of the helicopter into an invisible ambush point. Distance, wind speed, signal delay, battery life, and approach angle all had to be almost perfectly precise. If even one variable was wrong, the entire plan would collapse. But if everything unfolded according to calculation, the 6 Ukrainian operators would have a chance to make history. As soon as the Mi-28's flight path was confirmed along the Moscow to Kharkiv Railway, the control team positioned there immediately shifted from reconnaissance to interception. The team at White Hills quickly packed up its equipment to move toward the railway line, while the team in the Seversky Donets River Valley held its position, ready to serve as the reserve force. The 6 operators had only 9 minutes left to solve an interception problem that no FPV unit had ever solved before. In front of the operator sat the Shrike-10 FPV, shaped more like a racing aircraft than an air defense weapon. Its carbon fiber frame, electric motors, camera, and most of its control components all came from civilian production lines in China. But beneath the UAV's body was something entirely different. A Russian fragmentation warhead recovered from the battlefield and modified to fit onto the Shrike-10. An explosive charge once designed to attack Ukraine was now being sent back into the sky, aimed directly at a Russian Mi-28. Just as they were preparing to power up, a warning appeared. Moisture had corroded the detonation contact point. The signal was unstable. If they did not fix it, the Shrike-10 could hit the target, but the warhead would fail to explode. The operator dropped to one knee, removed the protective cover, and checked every connection. His teammate called out the distance: 7 miles, 6 miles. On the video screen, the Mi-28 was still flying straight ahead, not changing course. With every second that passed, the firing window closed tighter. If they did not launch in time, the helicopter would fly straight through the entire ambush zone. Contact at 9 o'clock, speed 110 miles per hour, altitude 120 feet. The information came through the headset just as the operator restored the detonation signal on the Shrike-10. On the video screen, 3 sensors were continuously recalculating the target's position using time difference of arrival data and frequency shifts caused by the Doppler effect of the rotor noise. But then the Mi-28's movement path suddenly shifted away from the expected corridor. Instead of continuing to follow the Moscow-Kharkiv Railway, the helicopter banked to one side, left its straight flight path, and turned west. Its speed remained unchanged, but it was now entering a completely different corridor between the railway line and the White Hills area. The calculated interception point was now useless. The Mi-28 was only 8 miles from the ambush zone, while fog layers from the Seversky Donets River Valley were beginning to disperse, causing moisture to gather into thick white bands that covered everything near ground level. In only a few minutes, the helicopter would disappear from optical camera view. Zvuk could still hear it, but acoustic data could only provide a target area, not a visual image precise enough for an operator to drive a Shrike-10 into a helicopter moving at 110 miles per hour. At White Hills, the control team had just finished moving into its new position and was preparing to launch when another problem appeared. The controller would not recognize the battery. The operator removed the battery pack, wiped the contact points, and plugged it in again. The screen flashed for less than a second before shutting off completely. Moisture in the rushed movement may have damaged an internal connector pin, leaving the primary Shrike-10 unable to start. He tried a third time. No signal. In the headset, the distance to the Mi-28 kept shrinking. With no time left for repairs, the White Hills team was forced to abandon the primary UAV and pull the backup Shrike-10 from its transport bag. It could still fly, but the entire system had to be set up again. Controller connection, receiver synchronization, video channel configuration, and motor response checks. Under normal conditions, each step would take only a few seconds. But now, every second carried the Mi-28 another 150 feet forward. The operator plugged in the backup battery, powered up the system, and waited for the screen to reload. The first video channel was filled with interference. The second received no signal. On the third setup attempt, the camera image finally appeared, trembling slightly through the fog and the tree trunks ahead. The UAV still worked, but during the time-lost switching equipment, the Mi-28 had traveled almost another mile and continued drifting away from the original interception point. The team in the Seversky Donets River Valley immediately updated the new approach heading. Instead of charging straight toward the railway corridor, the Shrike-10s now had to turn west and cut diagonally across the helicopter's new flight path. Adjust left. The voice from the Zvuk team came through the headset. Mi-28 is continuing to change course. Hold 9 o'clock. Stand by for updated intercept point. The operator pushed the throttle forward. The backup Shrike-10 lifted off the ground, skimmed over the grass, and accelerated into the fog. On the screen, the landscape quickly turned into a gray-white blur, leaving only the electronic compass and artificial horizon to help him maintain direction. But the fog could only hide the Mi-28 from the camera. It could not help the two Russian pilots escape the limits of physics. The helicopter could not climb because the moment it rose above the terrain masking it, it would enter the detection zone of Ukrainian radar. It also could not keep drifting farther west, where the slopes and cliffs around White Hills were tightening the flight corridor into an increasingly narrow passage. In the headset, the Zvuk team kept updating the new parameters: speed stable, altitude unchanged, still moving west. The operator held the throttle and continued pushing the UAV through the fog, even though the camera image had become nothing more than streaks of gray and white. Battery level showed 70%, but voltage was dropping faster than expected. The cold air was draining power from the battery pack each time the motors accelerated. The Shrike-10 still had enough energy to reach the intercept point, but almost no chance of making a second approach. At the same time, a Russian Krasuka-4 electronic warfare system began sweeping the radio spectrum. Its operators tried to identify the UAV's control frequency so they could jam it or cut the link completely. But the Shrike-10 kept jumping across multiple channels. Every time the Russians locked onto a suspicious signal, the UAV had already moved to the next frequency. The interference levels surged. The image on the screen broke into blocks, then disappeared completely. The Shrike-10 immediately switched into autonomous mode, using inertial sensors and preloaded image maps to recognize the railway line, forest edges, and terrain below. No longer fully dependent on the operator, the UAV continued racing toward the coordinates calculated by the Zvuk team. At exactly 1:21 hours local time, the fog ahead was suddenly torn open. The Mi-28 burst out of the gray-white layer almost exactly at the intercept point the Ukrainian team had predicted. The Mi-28 tore through the dense forest, hugging the narrow valley below White Hills as if moving along an invisible rail. The terrain helped it avoid Ukrainian radar, but it also turned its flight path into a trap. Thick forest on the left, a rock face on the right. The helicopter could not climb or suddenly change direction without putting itself in danger. The reconnaissance UAV confirmed that the target was still following the forest edge. But as soon as the Mi-28 appeared on the screen, the lead operator immediately checked the Shrike-10's battery level. 50% remaining, 3 miles to the intercept point. The Mi-28 was moving at 110 miles per hour, far faster than the fragmentation warhead FPV, which could only reach 80 miles per hour. Chasing it was impossible. They only needed to determine where it would be forced to pass and get there first. It was still a difficult calculation, with wind speed, battery level, altitude, and time to intercept all changing second by second. But in the end, it was still mathematics. Zvuk data quickly identified a small gap between the forest edge and the base of the cliff. Here, the flight corridor narrowed so much that the Mi-28 could barely change altitude or direction. That would be the ambush point. The operator moved the two Shrike-10 group ahead of the target, lowered it to 16 feet above the treetops, and reduced motor power. The propeller spun just enough to keep the UAV hovering against the dark forest background, saving every percentage point of battery for the final acceleration. The number on the screen dropped to 40%. Farther ahead in the corridor, the second Shrike-10 group had taken its backup position. The third group held back behind them, maintaining a wide observation angle to confirm the result or continue the interception if the first strike failed. The three UAV groups formed a trap stretched along the valley. Meanwhile, the Krasuka-4 system continued sweeping across the radio spectrum. On the screens of the Russian electronic warfare crew, suspicious signals appeared for fractions of a second, then vanished, only to reappear on an entirely different channel. The Russians knew UAVs were operating in the area, but continuous frequency hopping across 50 channels, combined with trees and cliffs reflecting radio waves, made it impossible to pinpoint the exact source. Every time Krasuka-4 began locking onto one signal, the Shrike-10 had already moved to the next communication channel. In the operator's headset, a warning from Zvuk suddenly came through: target is entering the corridor. The heavy, steady beat of the Mi-28's rotor was echoing through the forest. The sound struck the cliff face, bounced through the tree trunks, and returned to the sensors from multiple directions, making the initial range difficult to determine. But as data from multiple receiving stations was combined, the error margin rapidly narrowed. Range: 800 yards. The operator gently pushed the throttle. The Shrike-10 lifted above the canopy but still kept itself below the helicopter's flight path. 500 yards. A sudden opening appeared between the treetops. For a few brief seconds, sunlight cut through the fog and reflected off the Mi-28's cockpit glass. That glint revealed everything the operator needed to know: position, altitude, heading, and closing speed. The helicopter was flying straight into the ambush point. On one side was dense forest. On the other was a vertical cliff face. The two Russian pilots had almost no room left to evade, even if they detected the threat. 2 more meters. Only a few seconds remained. The operator pushed the throttle forward. All 4 motors of the Shrike-10 instantly surged to full power. The UAV burst out of the treetops and climbed straight toward the belly of the Mi-28. But the moment it entered the rotor wash from the helicopter, an invisible wall of turbulence slammed into it. The vortex from the main rotor struck the cliff and bounced back down into the valley, pushing the Shrike-10 off its trajectory. The image on the screen shook violently. Tree trunks, rock, and the helicopter's body spun together through bands of white interference. The operator pulled the stick left, trying to keep the UAV from hitting the cliff. Another gust slammed it back toward the forest. At this speed, one correction too hard would be enough to send the Shrike-10 into the trees or cause it to lose control completely. But if he reacted too slowly, the Mi-28 would pass the intercept point and open the distance in only seconds. The operator could no longer see the entire helicopter. On the screen, there were only dark shapes, part of the fuselage and the blurred rotation of the rotor above. He held the throttle at maximum. The Shrike-10 kept climbing through the chaotic airflow. Ahead, the second operator watched the entire approach through the camera of the backup UAV, his finger already resting on the throttle. If the first drone was thrown off course, he would have only seconds to attempt the next interception. The third UAV remained behind, recording everything happening inside the narrow corridor between the forest and the cliff. The distance between the Shrike-10 and the Mi-28 kept changing every second. 10 yards, then 5 yards. One wrong movement would be enough to end the ambush in the trees below. But if the operator could hold the trajectory for just 4 more seconds, the Russian explosive charge mounted beneath the Ukrainian UAV would slam directly into Russia's own attack helicopter. The interception had entered its decisive moment. From the Shrike-10's video, it is impossible to know whether the 2 Russian pilots saw the threat coming in time. But the UAV's final trajectory shows that the Ukrainian operator brought it around from behind, aiming directly at the tail section of the Mi-28. That is one of the most vulnerable points on a helicopter. The tail rotor is responsible for countering the torque from the main rotor and keeping the fuselage from spinning out of control. If that system is damaged, the Mi-28 can lose directional control almost immediately. The distance closed, 5 yards. Then the screen turned into a band of white static. Impact came at 1:26 hours local time. The Shrike-10 struck the helicopter's tail section. The video signal cut out at the exact moment of impact. But according to Ukrainian Unmanned Systems Forces Commander Robert Midair, the strike caused the Mi-28 to pitch downward and crash near Vyazavoye in Russia's Belgorod region. The video of the attack was released by him on the 15th of July, 2026. The unit responsible was identified as the 427th Independent Unmanned Systems Regiment, RIRO. Within seconds, the attack helicopter that had been hunting Ukrainian UAVs became the target of a small FPV drone. According to Ukraine's claim, the Mi-28 Night Hunter was destroyed and crashed on Russian territory. However, the publicly available footage ends at the final approach, so the result after impact has not been fully verified by independent sources. At the time the first reports were posted, Russia had also not issued an official response regarding the loss, but the cost imbalance alone shows the scale of the strike. A Mi-28 is estimated to cost around $16 to $18 million, while the FPV drone used in the mission may have been worth only a few hundred to a few thousand. A small platform assembled from commercial components confronted a combat helicopter worth tens of millions of dollars. And according to Ukraine, it won. This was not merely the result of a single successful impact, it was the final point in an entire chain of coordination. The Zvuk acoustic network detected the sound. Reconnaissance data identified the flight corridor. Calculations placed the UAV ahead of the target, and 6 operators patiently locked the Mi-28 into a trap between the forest and the cliff. Expensive technology does not always win. Sometimes all it takes is a device thousands of times cheaper, appearing in the right place at the right time. What do you think decided the success of this interception? Technology, calculation, or the courage of the Ukrainian operators? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the channel and continue supporting a just peace for Ukraine. Goodbye.